Buried deep in the lineage of David, there is a man marked for life by his name. A man who thousands of years later would rise from obscurity because of a humble, heartfelt prayer. Experience God's blessing for your life. The prayer of Jay-Bez.
Matthew chapter 5, here's the word blessed. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Wait a minute, is that the kind of feelings you have if somebody mocks you out because you believe in Jesus at work and revile you? Is that your first feeling? You know, I was driving to a little village in the middle of India. It's 2.5 hours outside of Hyderabad. And as we were driving, I was speaking to the man who was taking us out there to this little church, and I said to him, what's the biggest problem this little church is having? He said, the little church is having a huge problem with persecution. They burned a house. They throw rocks inside the opening where the windows aren't the people. They beat up some people. And some of the people are thinking about it's too hard. Well, he talked a little bit more, and he said to me, so what are you going to preach on? I said, I'm going to preach on persecution. He said, you ever preached on persecution? I said, no, sir. And I don't want you to talk to me the rest of the way there because I got to make a sermon on persecution. Why? Because that's the #1 need they have. Do you know where I went? I went to this passage right here. Because Jesus says, blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely. How can a person be blessed if you're getting reviled? There's got to be something else here. Well, look back at the verse. Jesus takes it to the next limit. He says, rejoice and be exceedingly glad. For why? For great is your reward. Where? In heaven. You know where their reward is? It's certainly not right then, is it? It's certainly not right then. But you know what Jesus is saying? Rejoice and be exceedingly glad. How can you be exceedingly glad? Because Jesus says, you think you're suffering a lot here? Well, you are. But now come with me. Where do you see the size of the reward I'm going to give to you for what you just did for me? When you see what I'm going to give to you, you're going to say, I wish I could have suffered more for you. That's why he says, rejoice and be exceedingly glad. Oh, you mean there's blessings that aren't on earth? That's a whole other series. That's a whole other series. But that's not the Jay-Bez blessing, is it? He's not expecting God to bless him in heaven. He wants a blessing right here. I call that the compensation blessing. And in your notebook it says, given to everyone on the basis of their life, but after death. But after death. Let's go to number 5, the compassion blessing. The compassion blessing. This is given on the basis of God's character to those who ask. What's the requirement? There is none except asking. Psalm 67 verse 1 says, God be merciful to us and bless us and cause his face to shine upon us. What's the prayer of the person praying this saying? Lord, would you please bless us? Okay, what's the condition? There isn't one. Just would you please bless me because I ask, and because, don't miss this, because you love to be merciful and gracious, and you love to give, and, like we talked in the last session, God commands you to ask. I command you to ask my Father so that he can give good things to you. Now let's go off of this first perspective to secondly, the practical steps for the Jay-Bez blessing. If you said to me, how do I do this now? How do I get some of these Jay-Bez blessings you keep talking about? I want to spell the word bless. First of all, beseech God daily for his bountiful blessings. Ask him every single day. If you didn't ask God to bless you today, you could have missed blessings that he said to you, you know, I really was going to give these to you, but you never asked me to give them to you. You're not going to be getting his blessing, you got to ask for them. Number 2, list and thank God for his many blessings. This is absolutely wonderful. if you don't have a journal, if you don't write anything down, I'd encourage you for the next 30 or so days, just get a piece of paper anywhere, I don't care where it is, and just get your pen, and you know what? You'll begin to see God's blessings because they'll be obvious to you. A rewarder once came to me and said, you know, isn't all this just a coincidence? I mean, these blessings and everything? I said, well, it may appear that way, but just ask the person who received them. You know, we're adults. We know what a coincidence is. But the people who run up to me, they're not saying, it may have been a blessing. I'm really not quite sure. They're running up and saying, oh, wait, I tell you what God has done for me. Now, what does the Bible say here? It says in Psalm 103, bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all of his benefits. What's a blessing? It's a benefit. And my encouragement to you, just try this for a month. Just start writing it down. Lord, this is what you did for me today. Some days you're not going to have something to write down. Some days you're going to have 2 or 3 things to write down. Now, here comes the next one. Now hold on to this one. What should I do, you know, when God gives me one of these blessings? What should I do? I think so many times we feel a little guilty. Oh, maybe I shouldn't really take all this blessing. I'm not quite sure. Well, look what the Bible says in 1 Timothy chapter 6. Command those who are rich in this present age not to be haughty, nor to trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, who gives us richly, what's the next word? All things to be guilty about. Is that what it says? To enjoy. What does that mean? To have a good time. God's up in heaven and he says, thanks for asking. Here's a good thing from me to you. Enjoy it. Well, Lord, I'm not quite sure I deserve that. Well, you don't. It's a gift. I was talking to one guy and he said, you know, God's been blessing me and blessing me. It's just amazing, but it's going to all change. I said to him, what do you mean it's going to all change? He says, well, one day the other shoe's going to fall. So what do you mean? He says, well, you only can have so many good things, and then all of a sudden, the bad things, it's going to have to equal out. I said, where did you get that idea about? Not from God. Now, what am I trying to say here a little bit? For some reason, Christians are having a problem with this whole issue of should I really enjoy a blessing that God gives? I don't mean be selfish with it, but you ought to enjoy it. Don't be saying, yeah, but I don't deserve it. The answer is, no, you don't. So, what? Enjoy it. Have a good time. Number 4, share your blessings with others. Share your blessings with others. Look at that verse, 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 8. It says, let them do good, that they may be rich in good works, ready to give, willing to share. When God gives you something, share it. You know, this pen, this is an amazing pen. When God does a special thing for our family, Darlene and I give what's called a thank offering to God. It's never a specific amount of money. It's never to a church or an organization. It's just both of us are paying attention to somebody who has something that we think God would enjoy giving money to, and we give it. And this one time, it didn't happen. And about 2 weeks went by and nothing showed up. And our refrigerator broke. And we were on our way down to buy a new refrigerator. And we pulled in the parking lot, and I said to Darlene, I said, sweetheart, you know, it's been 2 weeks. Do you know what we should do? No, I don't have any idea. Me either. I said, it's unlike God for this to happen. So we went inside, and she found the refrigerator. And the man was very, very helpful. He was from a different country and was very, very effective in his job with us. And he said, as we were going back up to sign and purchase it, he said, you know, there's a special going on in our store right now. You can use our money for a year with no interest. I said, well, that's terrific. So they got the contract out, and I got out my favorite pen. And I began to sign my name, and the man said, oh, that is a Mont Blanc pen. I said, yes, sir, this is my favorite pen. Very few things in my life I really enjoy. I enjoy a Mont Blanc pen. And I went back to sign it, and this guy said, one of my lifelong goals, before I go back to Africa, is to get a Mont Blanc pen. And as soon as he said it, I said to the Lord, no, I'll give him money. I don't want to give him my pen. Not my pen. And I started shaking my head, and I looked over at Darlene, and she was almost laughing. She knew how much I liked this pen. And I was trying to get myself collected, and I said, sir, you know, I've been carrying somebody else's pen around for a long time, and I've enjoyed it, but the owner told me I can't have it anymore, and he'd like you to have it just because he wants you to have it. And his name is the Lord God, and here is his pen to you. Enjoy it. Well, I told that story in a particular sermon in California at one of my friend's churches, Dr. David Jeremiah, and I forgot all about it. A year went by, and I was at the Christian Booksellers Convention walking down a hallway very, very wide. And I was talking to somebody else, and all of a sudden somebody called out my name. And I stopped, and it was people everywhere, and it was a man named Tim LaHaye. Tim LaHaye is an old friend, and he wrote the series along with Jerry Jenkins, Left Behind. And he comes up to me and he says, Bruce, I'm so glad I saw you. I said, oh, it's nice to see you too. He said, oh no, David sent me a copy of your sermon. What sermon? The sermon where you told that story about the pen. I said, oh, yeah, that was a long time ago. He said, oh no, he says, I was listening to it, and guess what God said to me? He said, give him your Mont Blanc pen. This is Tim LaHaye's Mont Blanc pen. It is more blessed. Look at that. Share. Now, I want to say something to you. Don't you ever come up to me and say, I love a Mont Blanc pen. And I said to him, you know, Tim, isn't it so special that you've become so famous all over the world, and yet when the Lord touches your heart about giving to somebody else, you remember it for months. You see somebody across the hallway, you call out his name. I said, that just meant a lot to me. And I smiled. I said, I'm going to tell that story to somebody else. He said, oh, don't tell that story. I said, Tim, I'm going to tell that story. And now you're hearing that story. You know, my friend, wouldn't it be nice if someday somebody told a story like that on you? Share the blessings with others. Well, the last one I want you to see is something really surprising. Pay attention just for a minute. You know, deep down inside is a deeper question. Some of you are really thinking with me, and some of you are changing your mind about this blessing thing. Is it really right to seek blessing from God? Is it really right to ask God? Is it really right to seek honor from God? I mean, to really seek it inside of you. I mean, what does God think about a man or a woman or a young person who actually is motivated, seeking honor from God, seeking blessing from God? What does God think about that? Because if God in heaven says, I don't want you seeking that, that's wrong, don't seek honor from me, then I would feel one way. What would happen, however, if he said, I want you to seek honor from me? How would that change you if God said, seek honor from me? A lot. Well, take a look at the verse in your notebook, John chapter 5, verse 41. Jesus speaking says, I do not receive honor from men. How can you believe who receive honor from one another and do not seek the honor that comes from the only God? What does Jesus say? How come you don't seek honor from God? I seek honor from God, said Jesus. I don't seek honor from you, but I seek honor from God. Honor and blessing is something you ought to be seeking for. Wouldn't it be absolutely terrible to come before heaven and for God to say, you know, I had so many blessings I wanted to give to you. So many. But you never wanted them enough to ask me for them. Well, what are the potential results? What could it be like to a man or a woman or a young person who really decides to pray the prayer of Jay-Bez for blessing day after day after day after day? The first one's obvious. You will obtain more of God's blessings. You will get more because you asked. Number two, this one may surprise you. your heart will be overwhelmed by God's blessings. Now, I want you to think about that. Your heart will be overwhelmed with God's blessings. I was at a church down in Houston recently, and they had 2 services, and I was right between both services, and I was standing down here, and I was facing up to the pulpit, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around and looked, and it was a woman I had never seen before, and she says, "I don't go to this church." I was on my way to my own church, and God said, "Go to this church." And she says, "That's never happened to me before, but I decided to come to this church." And she said, "I didn't know why till I came in the back and I got the bulletin out, and lo and behold, I saw you were preaching, and I knew why God had me here." She says, "I've sinned. I've committed a big sin." I said, "I'm so sorry." She said, "Well, I got your book." And I started really asking God to bless me. And she said, "He did. And He kept blessing me and blessing me and blessing me until I felt my heart was going to burst." And I said, "God, please stop the blessings. I can't handle anymore." And then she looked at me. "I sinned, right?" I said, "No, ma'am. You just hit Jay-Bez." Now, I want you to think about that. That's the way it's meant to be. Most people, however, their hearts are kind of empty of the blessing. Instead of saying, "Lord, I can't handle any more," they're saying, "Oh, I wish my life would change. I wish my heart would fill with blessings." I want you to understand something. What I'm saying to you is meant to happen to you. It's meant to happen to you. I just saw this a little while ago. We picked up our daughter at a parking lot from camp with all the other teenagers. And Darlene and I were standing there waiting for Jessica to get her baggage, and a couple came up, and a man stopped, and he said, "Well, I've met you once, but I got that Jay-Bez book." I said, "Well, good." She says, "I've been praying it, but guess what? There are so many blessings." I said to God, "God, stop. No more blessings." I want you just to deal with this for a moment. This is a potential result for you. For you to be overwhelmed. Because, my friends, that's how it happens. It happens for me in the morning sometimes, when I just sit and start to pray or write in my journal, and God brings back to your mind all the blessings He's been giving to you. He'll whisper in your soul, one after the other. You won't even be expecting it. And pretty soon, your heart will feel like it's just going to burst. And your tears will come out of your eyes like they do mine. What a life. And then when you get up and you leave and you go to the marketplace or you go to your family, guess what? You have so much to give. You got so much to give when your heart is overflowing with this. So ask. Last one. Your life will overflow blessings to others. This is a deep one, my friends. This is an advanced one. If you only pray for a month, you're not going to get this one. If you pray for a couple months, you probably won't either. But if you pray month after month and year after year, my friend, you're going to experience, this is what I call the mega Jay-Bez blessing. The really big one. And I find it only comes to those people who really want it. And see, there's little blessings from God, medium-sized blessings from God, big blessings from God, and then the mega blessings from God. What is the mega blessing from God? Well, take a look at the verse in Acts chapter 20, verse number 35. He says, "I have shown you in every way by laboring like this, that you must support the weak. And remember the words of the Lord Jesus, that He said, it is more blessed to give than to receive." It is more blessed to do what? To keep getting? That's fine. Nothing wrong with receiving. But it is, watch this, more blessed. More blessed to give than to receive. You mean the big mega blessings on this side? Yes, it's okay to be on this side. You need to grow through this side, to be honest with you, to get to this side. Because so many times we're so needy over here that we need to receive it this way, to give it over here. But if you continue, my friend, you continue asking, your heart will overflow. And if you keep on begging God, Lord, bless me indeed. Bless me a lot. Pour out your blessing onto me. I want it. Please do it to me. The day will come, he will say, turn the chapter. It's time for the mega blessings. They're ready. And I promise you, friend, I don't know how God does it, but God will begin bringing people with great needs right to you. And you will have it in your heart to give. And you will give. And when you go to bed at night, you will realize the most significant thing you did that day was you gave. And that's where blessing is. But blessing early on. You know, you give a 2-year-old a toy, and somebody else comes up, let me pay you with your toy. What's a 2-year-old say? No, it's mine. And in the early blessing stage, guess what? We're 2-year-olds. We don't like to share. We don't have very many. We don't know how. But as time goes on and you grow up a little bit more and more and more, and you realize life is so full when you have God's blessings. You say, Lord, really bless me. This is the mega blessings. And God will send. And I promise you, you keep asking him and he'll keep sending to you more and more people that will blow your mind. And you'll say, oh, I helped so many people. And you'll understand it is more blessed to give. Well, let's get to our conclusion. How does God feel about this? This is one of the most surprising passages in the Bible about blessing. It's in Numbers chapter 6. I want you to read it very carefully. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, here's what I want you to do, Moses. Speak to Aaron and to his sons, saying, this is the way you shall bless the children of Israel. Here's how you bless them. God says, say to them. Now listen to what God's telling the leaders to do. Say this to the people. The Lord bless you. The Lord keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. You know what God tells us to do? You pray for the people. Lord, bless the people. Why? Because in God, here's you saying to him, bless them. And God says, yes, I will bless them. Even God tells us to do it. Well, I want to close this with a very personal story. Story's a bit hard to tell. A number of years ago, I took my father, who was in a wheelchair then, and our son, to a Promise Keeper Stadium event in Pittsburgh where there's about 50,000 men. And I spoke, and that weekend was a wonderful weekend that God moved. And afterwards, we came back home, and we sat together in the den with Darlene on the couch right here, and then Jennifer was next to Darlene, and then David was at the end of the couch. Jessica was on the floor, and I was in a big chair right here. And after we were finished sharing, there was a quiet moment in the conversation, and David at the end of the sofa kind of leaned forward like this and looked up at me and said, Dad, I want to ask you to do something for me. Sure, Dave, I'll be glad to. What is it? Dad, I want you to bless me. So that caught me off surprise. I said, sure, son, of course I bless you. No, Dad, I mean, really bless me. And with that, David just quietly stood up. He walked across in front of that sofa to where I was seated, and then he knelt at my feet. And he looked up at his dad and said, please, I want your blessing. And then hung his head. Emotion just swelled up, and I put my hands on the top of his shoulders. And I took everything in me to bless our son, to bless him and bless him of the dreams we had for him and the gifts God had given to him and the future, until there was nothing left in my soul to give. It was one of the most unique moments of my life. Was in a dry eye in the whole room until David didn't even say anything. He probably couldn't speak. I just quietly stood up, walked back across that sofa, And as he sat down, the Lord whispered to me, now, you know how I feel when you come to me and you kneel before my throne and you ask me to bless you. Never again let a day pass that you don't kneel before his throne and look into the face of your Father in heaven and say, oh God, please bless me indeed.